It's a project for high school social studies students, usually targeted at grade 9s, called Skookum Stories, and it centers around students as master storytellers. It's an inquiry cycle that starts out with asking questions about their family and their culture, and first of all even just establishing a notion of what family is. And for some of them it's a collection of elders, for some of them it's a community they come from, a support network, and for most it's often the direct connection to parents, grandparents, relatives, that sort of thing. The project itself is fairly simple. Conduct some research into personal histories and compare them with public histories, and use some tools like the historical thinking concepts and related geographic thinking concepts to tie together the meaning of it all and the purpose, and to try and gain some perspectives on it. When students' identity is on the line, they tend to be much more engaged and much more interested. When the students do this research, they find out cues about their own family and stories that often their parents don't know. Often it's 2 generations of information that kind of tends to skip a generation. There's about a 50-year gap we talked about where things kind of need to settle a little bit, and information, culture, ideas get transmitted across often 2 generations at a time, not 1 generation at a time. And so that's often why the parents don't know some of these stories. A lot of them find elders and grandparents and relatives and people in the community that are just sitting around waiting for someone to ask a good question, and they start telling some things that are of immense interest. Take a random collection of 25 kids in northern British Columbia, and they have ties to almost anything that's of significance in a textbook, for instance, for the course. So I think the last time around where we did this project, I had connections to Red River Rebellion and Loyalist settlement and Japanese internment and the 60s scoop and residential schools and every kind of immigration pattern from every country, you know, people making their way to Canada. A lot of students whose immigration experience and their family background is described as a journey from fear to hope. And so there's a sense that Canada is a place where people's stories get settled in and told. So I mean, yeah, there's lots of good connections that way. I really like the idea of them learning from each other, and you know, you build a trusting, safe learning environment, do this thing as a teacher, and it seems like they're more or less coming along for the ride. But as soon as another student draws their attention and draws their interest in the same story you might have been talking about a day before, you know, there's a lot of, they pay attention. Social studies isn't always the most interesting subject for them, but I know that 5-10 years later they'll come back and they'll be glad for it, because it'll have a bit of foundation in their own identity that they wouldn't have had otherwise. And for a few of them, certainly not all of them, but for a few of them, they use this as the foundation for further inquiry and further research and for travels and for conversations down the road. And that's really cool to have students come back after a few years and sort of tell me how they've continued the storytelling afterwards.